Gandhi once said, in a gentle way, you can shape the world. And I'm going to interpret this a bit more liberally for what the world could be, because the world can sometimes be a group of people, one person, or sometimes even wider. In his case, obviously, it was much wider. But for my case, I will talk about how simple things we do that aren't necessarily out front can actually change either the way people go on throughout the rest of their life, communities, specific communities, and also sometimes, in some instances, literal whole lives. The first one I'll use is that my mother is a kindergarten teacher. She teaches kids, and she's sort of slowly went lower. She used to teach second grade when she first started, but eventually she got lower and lower until she started kindergarten, and she wanted to do pre-K, but she stuck with kindergarten just for the lack of teaching. And when you work with young kids, a lot of times you can't really exactly give them long speeches about values. They might not get everything. So normally the way you teach them is it is thought out, but it's normally kind of more subliminal. So you teach them certain rules. So certain games, she has, seats that are colored for in teams, and they sit there. And it sort of slowly will teach them kind of certain orders, certain things that you respect in other people. And overall, it's not something really kind of aggressive, but as they go on, she has heard, oh, I know I had a person from your class. They do this thing, just kind of, it becomes a habit. They learned, she has shaped kind of their world. They might remember back on her, like, oh, I'm used to doing a certain thing, and it might be back to just the way she slowly kind of taught them the habit. Another example I'll use is a incident I heard, which when I took a class here, the professor told a story of how he knew a man who was Catholic, but he lived near a Jewish community, and a lot of times when there were holidays and they needed certain non-Jewish people to do certain things that they could not do, he would always do those things for them. And it became just part of his life, and he became kind of part of their life. And it wasn't never anything that big, but when he died, they made a big, celebration of him, that even though it was just a little thing that he did for part of his life, it left an impact in a larger community than just himself. The last thing is something we often don't really think about, but often pets or animals, we kind of, just through what kind of seem like simple things to us, feeding them, giving them a space, we control kind of their whole lives. So one example I'll use is currently, it's season where we get silkworms for a lot of times in schools. And when I was young, I was really into silkworms that my mother would bring home, and they grow them and teaches children the life cycles. And it was one of my favorite things to do, is just feeding leaves, watching them grow, they become moths, they mate, and then they die. And then you wait till the next year, and eventually they'll do it all again. And just by doing that, you really are like controlling and kind of helping a life, because a lot of times you have a animal that, cannot fly, cannot do a lot of things. They're very, utterly domesticated. They need your help. And I never really thought about it that hard when I was a kid. It showed me like how life is, but I never really thought how just a simple thing, giving something a home, giving something fuel, can really change it. Like they would die, it really taught me like the value of just even simple actions. And so I do agree with the quote that we don't always need to necessarily have, we can have intent, but we don't necessarily need to go aggressively. Even small things can be big and make big changes.
Well, you're a little hesitant at the beginning. The reinterpretation of the quote is okay, but it's expressed in kind of an abstract way, so I'm not exactly sure where you're headed. As you're talking, I get a little bit more sense of sort of where you're going. Some of the examples are okay. You've got a little bit of detail, for instance, on when you're talking about the silkworms. I still wasn't quite clear where you were going with the silkworm thing. I understood the idea of the teacher a little bit more. But at the end, when you're talking about it, I thought that you managed to get everything together to kind of fit the theme. And the conclusion helps you quite a bit there. Presentation-wise, maybe a little bit more hesitant this time than you were in the previous speech, but otherwise, most of the things that you were doing right before, you continue to be doing okay. I didn't see anything that was, except for the content, where it just felt a little bit less focused than it might have been. But I thought you rescued it pretty well at the end. All right.
There was no
Thank you.
attention.